Hello and welcome to another Victoria 3 developer diary. This time we're going to be talking about UI, but first we've got a couple of things to look at first, right? So obviously we've got this lovely art image thing that you can see here. Again, just pointing out the artwork in Victoria 3 is looking pretty freaking great. Just putting that out there. Secondly, we have two Twitter teasers to go over. First off, one by Martin here talking about Lancashire. Now, you can't see my hometown from this this image, this screenshot, but it's relatively close. It's reasonably close. But yeah, quite possibly the most industrialised state in the world in 1836, Lancashire is a vital economic centre in Britain. Its large textile industry has historically been credited with a key role in giving Britain a head start on the Industrial Revolution. So there's a couple of things that we can see from this image. We can see that there are ways that my screen can go bigger and smaller. My apologies for that. So we've got the textile mills there, we've got arms industry, construction sector, which is one that we have not seen yet. We do know, though, that constructing buildings or constructing industries, constructing warehouses, constructing, your factories, it does take materials like concrete, it takes materials like steel perhaps, but it also has a human cost as well. Not so much in lives, but in human labor. You will be employing laborers to construct your factories, which is not present in Victoria 2, and I think this construction sector is probably where you're going to be able to find that information on exactly what you're constructing and how many laborers you are employing to construct said thing. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I like it. It's interesting. There's a little bit of, no, I wouldn't say controversy, but there's some people who are not super fans of seeing the cities on the map. Personally, I am perfectly fine with that. I think it's great to see the cities on the map. I enjoy the fact that they're there. They give a bit of more life to the map, and I do think the map is looking really good. It is looking better than it has done in previous screenshots. Every screenshot seems to have just a little bit more of an upgrade, so it's good to see that they are working on it more and more. There is, however, the conspicuous, I would say, absence of Glasgow as a city. You should be able to see it on this screenshot, and it is a significant city in 1836. Named things like the second city of the empire, for example. So yeah, I'm sure things are still being worked on, and that is probably one of the things we will end up seeing before too long, hopefully. But yeah, nice stuff. Next up, we have this one from the Vicky3 Twitter as well, because we're going to be talking about UI. There's obviously a Twitter teaser about the UI, which kind of confirms that we've got this funky aesthetic, let's say. For the game speed, obviously the standard 5 game speeds, pausing and playing different music tracks. Though I would say actually, is it actually pausing and playing music tracks? Because it may just be pausing the game, and then this would be playing the game. Not having the ability to see the music up here is actually a bit awkward. I would like to see that, and hopefully that would come in. I at first glance, when I looked at it this first time, I was like, oh yeah, no, that's where the music is. There's a pause and a play button. But there is no pause and play here, so yeah. And also being able to choose the track as well should be a thing. Hopefully that's still being worked on. The ability to choose which track you're playing is, I think, pretty nifty in the more recent Paradox titles, and I'd like to see it return. But anyway, that's enough about Twitter teasers. Let's actually get into the dev diary itself, the user interface overview. So this one is from Kenneth. He's the 2D art lead on Victoria 3. Working on the game's UI with his team is a big part of what he does on the game. From here on, whenever the word UI is mentioned, it refers to an overview of the 3 categories, panels, buttons, and icons, which make up the UI of the game. The majority of the information and the decisions a player makes happen in the UI. There is a huge opportunity to engage and immerse the player into the world of Vicky 3 through the UI. As mentioned in the previous dev diary, the UX, so user experience, their team's focus is to make this massive amount of information approachable and accessible. Us in the UI team work extremely closely with them to display all that information in a visually appealing way. This is one of the criticisms that I've seen around Crusader Kings 3, for example. As opposed to Crusader Kings 2, or in comparison to Crusader Kings 2, some people thought that it was less immersive in the UI elements. So, for example, in Crusader Kings 2, if you're playing as a tribe, your UI would be very full of wood. If you're playing as a Christian, you'd have lots of stone, and if you're playing as a Muslim, you'd have lots of like jade, I think it was, and marble. And it just helped to differentiate the different areas, whereas in Crusader Kings 3, everyone's kind of got the same UI, or at least they did on release. I'm not sure how it's going to be with Royal Court coming out soon. But yes, that is one of the things that I'd seen as a critique of Crusader Kings 3. So, I mean, it's good to see that they're, taking into account immersiveness into account when they're designing the UI, for sure. Art pillars and how it ties with the UI. So they have 3 core pillars for Victoria 3's art style. The pillars guide the overall art direction and capture the feelings we want to convey in the game, which includes, of course, the UI. So it needs to be prestigious. The UI is inspired by the extravagance and luxuries of the upper class in the Victorian era. It should feel elegant and exquisite. It needs to be vintage and idyllic. Vintage here means something from the past that is of high quality. The Romanticism art movement is a source of inspiration for the art direction. Seems fitting given that it originated in the 1800s, and the idealization of the idyllic past and nature fits nicely with the vintage feel that we want to incorporate in the UI. And it needs to be detailed yet approachable. High level of detail with intricate elements, but used sparingly so it does not become cluttered and overwhelming. This is kind of apparent in the text. Let's see if there's a good example. Well, I guess here. So up here we've got buildings, and every capital letter has this little swoosh. I don't know what the font term is for this. I don't know. There's probably a name like serif, or I don't know. I don't know what this swoosh is called, but if you have lots of capital letters, for example, we had an example before of Afro-Caribbean plantation owner or something like that, right? But there were lots of capital letters in the title here. It was very long, and it looked kind of awful. So yeah, having the clutter and overwhelming nature of the text, it's something to bear in mind. This swoosh needs to be used sparingly. So, UI panels. UI panels form the base or background of every single UI menu, be it full screen pop-ups or on the sides in the game. If it's not on the map, it's on a UI panel. We chose to incorporate Art Nouveau elements into the panels. Art Nouveau is primarily inspired by nature and the natural forms and curves of plants and flowers. This aligns with the art pillar vintage and idyllic. The style is also prominent in the architecture of the upper echelons of society in the 1800s. Its intricate details invoke a feeling of extravagance and elegance, which aligns with the other 2 art pillars. We need to be careful not to put too many detailed patterns, as this will distract the main function of the UI, which is to display information to the player. Hence, the focus on rich details on frames and borders of the panels, as well as headers, where the title of the menu resides. Yeah, I'd say just less swooshes, and we're on a winner here, because I really do like the look of the UI. I think it looks fantastic. I'm a big fan of Art Nouveau, and yes, I did know what Art Nouveau was before I read this dev diary. I'm not that uncultured, although the reason I know it is because of the difference between Art Nouveau and Art Deco, which is basically the difference between elf art and dwarf art, because you know I'm a bit of a fantasy nerd like that. But yeah, no, love it. The UI looks awesome. I can't fault it really. Big fan. So this is an UI panel. Honestly, what I will do a little bit of critique is of grammar, and I know I'm gonna get people disagreeing with me because they'll see, oh, it's a U. That's a fucking vowel. Therefore, an. But no, it's all about the sound of the letter. U, like the sound that you say when you say UI, and there's a Y, which is not a vowel, mostly. So it's a UI or a UI, depending on how you pronounce a. An UI sounds like something Jeremy Clarkson would say. This is an UI panel. No, this is a UI panel. Anyway, whatever. A little grammatical gripe aside. Elaborate patterns with a touch of gold and faded fabric textures add that extra layer of prestige and vintage feel prominent in the Victorian era. Yeah, no, it looks great. Looks great. Absolutely fantastic. Loving it. The detail in the background of this as well is pretty dope. Yeah, I don't think there's anything specifically new in the information, like the workshops. We've seen all these kind of things before. War Machine Industries, I feel like that's maybe new. And I guess, you know, War Machine Industries, and then we can use a production method to change it from airplanes to tanks, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, I love it. Buttons. The buttons are the main elements in the game and the UI that the player interacts directly with. From the user experience point of view, players would need to identify the buttons almost instantaneously. Buttons should be identified as either navigation buttons, buttons that lead you to another UI screen, or action buttons, buttons that perform an action that affects the game world. With that in mind, we sought to create a template for the game's buttons while aligning it with our core art pillars. We use wood as a texture for the buttons for the aged vintage feel. All buttons have an emerald color, with 2 different shades to differentiate between action and navigation buttons. That's a decent way of making the differentiation. I kinda like that. This does look a little plain though, not gonna lie. So different shades of emerald for the buttons. Action buttons also have a thin gold border to differentiate them further, while still having both types recognized as buttons. What's this? This looks even better. There would be some UI screens that would have multiple buttons on them. How can we draw attention to higher priority buttons, if any? So the solution is to give them a more prestigious look by adding Art Nouveau elements around the borders and corners of the button. I like it. It looks great. Honestly, it looks fantastic. I'm a big fan of this for whatever reason. Hey, UI is important. It really is very, very important. So it's good when it's looking nice. So icons are a major part of the UI of Paradox games, and of course this is no different in Victoria 3. Icons in the game come in a wide variety of shapes, sizes, styles, and colours. Oh, he spelled it right. Whoever wrote this dev diary, I love you. Finally, we've got someone speaking the Queen's English. The correct English. The only correct English. Oh, in the dev diary. Yay. It feels good. It feels good. Shame that, you know, the game itself is using simplified garbage English. Big sad. Anyway, we use them to represent a host of different things, mechanics, statistics, and attributes in the game. I'll break down some of the different ways in which you use the icons, and hopefully you'll... Motherfucker. I was just praising you, and then you come in with a freaking y'all? Ugh. Cringe. Anyway, yeah, y'all. You could have contracted this even further. It could be y'all. You know, y'all. Whatever. Y'all gain a better. Oh, I can't. Y'all will gain a better insight into our design processes. Yep, y'all will do that. Buildings and goods. Y'all will learn about buildings and goods now. This group of icons are by far the most visual and detailed in the game. They are representations of actual things in the game world. These icons are akin to mini illustrations, and their primary purpose is to enhance immersion and fuel the imagination of our players. Bread. Yep, no, I like it. I'm going to totally turn some of these into emotes. For sure, because why wouldn't I? Especially the paddle steamer. Events, technologies, and pop groups. Academia and dynamite are both technologies that a player can research, but one seems to be a little abstract, while dynamite is an actual object in real life. How then do we approach such icons as a group? For technology and event icons, we decided to use objects from the real world, or several objects, to represent them. Since most of these icons are going to be pretty big for an icon, we decided to go for a highly detailed and realistic rendering to enhance immersion. It's pretty straightforward for technology like dynamite, but for protest events, we use something a little more symbolic, like a hand holding a loudhailer. That's dope. I like it. I like this as well. I like that. Yeah, all of these are great. All of these are great. For sure. These are pretty dope. So I've got dynamite, some kind of university education, a boiler, some diplomacy, protests, cogs and gears and stuff, voting, the expansion of the press freedom, probably. Love it. Dope stuff. Pop groups are represented by our amazing character models and icons. Since the character models will be a tad hard to see scaled down, we use icons to support them. The same guidelines apply when designing pop icons. For example, machinists are represented by a wrench. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. So, Vicky 2 obviously had very scaled down character models, and it worked. It just wasn't amazing. I do prefer the way they're doing it with, now the wrench is the machinist, rather than a little picture of a dude that probably could be multiple different pop types, because, dude's a dude just wearing different clothes, right? So I do like the way that they're showing this. And here is an example of actually what I'm talking about. Too many swooshes. Too many swooshes here. I think toning down the swooshes here, I think getting rid of the swooshes entirely when they're on this top banner area would probably be for the best, if I'm being honest. Moving on, the final group of icons we're going to talk about is a broad group which represents game mechanics, their categories, attributes, and stats. These icons tend to show up in multiple different UI screens and are not very big for an icon. They may need to appear in different sizes as well. Many of them would need to be recognizable when they're small. Therefore, we reduce the amount of details on these icons drastically and instead focus on a few choice colors and silhouettes. Okay, fair enough. I really, 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 really fucking hate the way that this looks. This looks terrible. Just showing the flag on top of occupied territory, I hate it so much. It looks awful. Give me standard occupation stripy lines. I don't like this. This looks just awful. I really, really dislike it. And what happens when you get multiple countries occupying land? It's gonna look pretty terrible as well. I'm not a fan of this. This looks terrible. It really looks bad. Anyway, this looks pretty cool though. I like this. That could be an emote as well. We can also use color, coding on these icons to make them more recognizable. For example, we can have positive condition icons being green and negative condition icons being red. But of course, you're going to need to have these coded for changes when it comes to color blindness settings that we talked about last week. Multiple things in Viki they have different color codings. So this should too, right? You could have, edit for color blindness modes. Just saying. Remember that. Interest group icons are a little bit more complex. Example of color coding. Players may not immediately remember and understand all the color coding within each subcategory of icons, but our hope is that this will get more familiar and identifiable over time. Other examples of this are the lens category icons. I actually had never recognized the fact that they had different colors. I don't know why, I just never clocked onto that. Also, what color is this supposed to be? What color are we talking? Industrialists being orange, we got intellectual or intelligent. No, this one's intelligentsia. This one's intellectuals. The faithful, the landowners, worker. I can't. These things are gonna get easier to remember when you've played the game for sure. Anyway, the tutorial. In the previous Dev Diary, Aaron and Henrik have previously mentioned the tutorial. He's going to talk a little bit more about the art that goes into helping players understand our incredibly deep and complex mechanics better. We believe that the combination of tooltips, text explanations, and infographics will help visualize the game mechanics better. Most infographics you find online, go ahead do a Google search, have a clean, stylized, and very modern look. We see an opportunity here to make it fit with the Victorian era better. This can definitely be an area where immersion is enriched and, of course, strengthen our art pillars. We took inspiration from newspaper illustrations and blueprint illustrations of the Victorian era and adopted it for our infographics. And as icing on the cake, we overlaid the drawings on top of an aged paper background. Yeah, I mean, sure, that looks fine, looks good, right? You can't really tell how well it fits in with the rest of the tutorial, how because I haven't played the tutorial, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, no, it looks good. It looks good. So that's all from him. Hope you've enjoyed the brief overview of the UI in Victoria 3. Join next week as Daniel goes over the journal entries. Looking forward to that one for sure. All right. This also, the way I'm looking at this as well is we're talking about UI and we're talking about journal entries next week. We're no longer talking about mechanics, and I think that's a good thing. I think that means the game is reasonably close to release, perhaps, potentially. I don't know. I feel like that's there's got a good amount of weight behind that, maybe. But yeah, I'd like to know what you guys think. Do you agree with me that the swooshes on, like, this building's icon, for example, looks a bit too much? And do you agree that, British English is just objectively superior? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, so please do leave them down there. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. I will attempt to go over the developer comments. I've been pretty hectically busy and still kind of sick. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. So that's why I haven't gotten around to doing the previous Dev Diaries developer comments. But as soon as I'm able, I'm going to do both this Dev Diaries and last Dev Diaries in the same video. But yeah, looking forward to that. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.